Welcome back to the Messianic Hour. I'm your host, Rabbi Scott. The show is dedicated to reaching the lost and educating the found. I'm here with my wife, Judy, as we share our faith from a Jewish and Gentile perspective. And we're going to be looking at the Feast of Sukkot. And give me a little insight here that you might not get on other stations. We'll say it that way. So, Judy, why don't you share about this feast of God dwelling among us?
Well, you know, we talked about Sukkot last week.
Right.
And this week we're going to, because we're now kind of doing this on YouTube, we're going to get anybody who wants to watch can go to the Messianic Hour. Going to give you a little show and tell today. And this that I have in my hand looks kind of like, as you like to say, a
now
lemon
people understand why it looks like a lemon on steroids.
It's called an etrog or a citron. It is round. It's kind of bumpy. It's yellow. And then we have our lulav. Now the lulav is actually made up of a date palm, a myrtle, and a willow. But because the lulav is the longest part of this, they call everything, all three of them bundled together, the lulav. And during Sukkot, you take it and you shake it. You can kind of hear it here. It makes noise, and you'll shake it in all directions.
North, south, east, and west.
And kind of showing that God has sovereignty over the entire earth. But there's some other meanings to the lulav and the etrog. The etrog has a good taste to it, although I have to admit I'm going on other people's recommendations. I've never eaten one, and a good fragrance. And there's two things it can represent: a person who has both wisdom and good deeds. It also represents the heart. Right. Then you have the myrtle. The myrtle has a good fragrance, but it's inedible. It kind of represents a person who has good deeds, but no wisdom. The lulav, the date palm, is edible, but it has no smell. And it represents the person with wisdom, but without good deeds. And the willow has neither taste nor smell, can't say that, represents a person with neither good deeds nor wisdom. So there's one little interpretation of it, but there's another one too based on kind of how they're shaped. And the lulav is long and it's straight, and it will represent someone's spine.
That's right.
The myrtle leaves kind of look like the eye, right? So it can symbolize your visual desires. The eye sees, the heart covets.
Right.
The willows represent lips, and it kind of connects activities with speech. And we do know it says, let the words of my mouth
and the meditations of my
heart be acceptable to you,
right,
O Lord our God. But there's also another interesting thing here about Sukkot. You know, we are going to dwell in a sukkah for 7 days. And there's really some interesting symbolism between the sukkah and a wedding canopy that's used. Because
which is called a huppah.
A huppah. So you've got the sukkah and the huppah.
The huppah and the sukkah.
Yeah, you want to start rapping with
I'm
that.
ready to go.
No, you're not. You're not going there, honey. Okay. So both of them are to symbolize joy. Sukkot is known as the Feast of Joy.
That's right.
And a huppah is representing the joy of a wedding, of a marriage, of the bride and groom.
And they both one represents a permanent home, being the huppah, and the sukkah is a temporary dwelling. Matter of fact, as we'll talk about in a minute, it's the dwelling in which we call a manger. The Greek word for manger is sukkah in Hebrew, and we have Yeshua being born in a sukkah at this feast.
And we know that Sukkot represents when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, and we know that they had left the only home, so to speak, Egypt, that they had known. And with the huppah, you've got two individuals sometimes leaving the only home that they knew and coming together to build a new one.
In a marriage, right?
That's right. Sukkot is a celebration of love, God's protection of his people when they were wandering. And we know that the huppah is definitely a celebration of love between a man and a wife.
With God as the center. Both
exactly.
Again in the sukkah, it's God dwelling among us.
The sukkah is kind of a weak structure. It's not meant to be there forever. It's a temporary structure, but it represents the strongest element of our faith, and that is our relationship with Adonai. A huppah, the wedding canopy, is also this weak structure, but it represents the strongest human relationship,
Right.
that between the man and the wife. In the Sukkah, you're supposed to live with God 24/7. Well, that's when you're married. You're
Right.
going to have a spouse that two becomes one
Right.
24/7 there too. And also, as you said, it represents a time of when God tabernacled with us. We know He's going to tabernacle with us again.
Right.
And the chuppah symbolizes the new home of the couple also.
And Judy, some people say, "Oh, we're no longer under the law. We don't have to do these feasts." Well, here's an interesting note: this feast is being done in heaven as well. This is the feast that says that if the nations don't come up, they're not getting any rain during the 1,000-year reign. So we can't say these are done away with. Why would God do away with these great feasts that all point to the miracles that He did? Why would we want to say, "Oh, we don't need to do these"? We should not only want to do them, we should desire to do them, because it brings us closer to God to see the miracles that He did, bringing us out of slavery and into the freedom of with His Messiah.
And in fact, what you were referencing there was Zechariah 14. I encourage you to go read Zechariah 14, 8 through 19. And it says, "Finally, everyone remaining from all the nations that came to attack Jerusalem will go up every year to worship the King, Adonai, to keep the festival of Sukkot."
Right.
So if the festivals have been done away with, how is this going to happen? How is this prophecy, because we can say
Right.
it's never been fulfilled, how is this prophecy going to be fulfilled?
And we know the only way it can be fulfilled is through the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, sitting upon His throne, Yeshua HaMashiach, who is here for both Jew and Gentile alike, coming together to worship Him, one God, one people.
And we know that Sukkot is still closely connected to water.
Right.
It's kind of the day of the universal judgment with regards to the blessing of rain and irrigation for the coming year. And we know in John 7, verses 37 and 38, Yeshua cried out, "I am the living water," on that festival, on
Right.
Hosanna Rabbah. He cried out, "I am the living water."
So those who say, "Oh, Yeshua never proclaimed His messiahship," not only did He do it, He did it one of the major three festivals where the pilgrims, where everyone, the religious Jews, came and heard. And it would have been silent when this was going on. And for Him to shout that out, He was proclaiming His messiahship.
And also, the Sukkah reminds us that we're just kind of travelers in this material world. Our true home is not here. Our dwelling places, as beautiful as they may be, are not our true home. And we know in John 14, verses 1 through 7, Yeshua says, "Do not let yourselves be disturbed. Trust in God and trust in me. In my Father's house are many places to live. If it weren't, I would have told you, because I'm going there to prepare a place for you."
Right, and we have this idea that there's all these little mansions up in heaven. There's not. There's one big mansion. We're all living in God's house. Just like the Israelites, when the groom would prepare for his bride, he would go to his father's house and build on an addition of the room for them to live in, and that's where they would go and be. And so we're going to be in the Father's house. Now, Judy, we just have a little bit of time left, so we've been sharing about how is this the time that Yeshua was born. Isn't it December 25th? Well, that's the date we know. It's definitely not. It's too cold. It doesn't work that way. Many of you have seen the video that talks about, the Star of Bethlehem. Maybe we can talk about that one next week, where this doesn't work out from a scriptural point of view. But what we do know is if he was born on the first day of Sukkot, that means on the 8th day, we have his circumcision. We have the start of the blood covenant that God establishes with His people that is ultimately fulfilled on the cross as He's executed and His blood is poured out for us at the Feast of Passover 30 to 33 years later, depending how you want to look at the calendar. So we see how this all comes together. But we believe this is when our Messiah was born, and you can date it back from looking at when John was born and when his father was in his role in the as the
priest
in the priest in the temple. So we have proof. Can we say 100%? No, but we definitely can say 100%. December 25th is not.
But God gave us His feast as His special times
And His signs, right?
And His sign. So why would it not? Why would He have
Exactly.
changed kind of his pattern. And he gave us the feast as patterns of his plan of atonement.
That's right. And the other thing he told us to do is to remember to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So until next week, this is Rabbi Scott
And Judy.
saying shalom and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
All right then, folks.